Tidal volume is the amount of air breathed in one normal breath. For an average human, the normal amount of air consumed in one breath is 500 millilitres. Tidal volume increases due to an increase in breathing depth. At steady-state exercise, once the oxygen consumption in the body has met the demand from the exercise, then tidal volume will plateau, just like breathing rate, because the breathing depth will reduce. Relating this to Mo Farah's training, as an elite athlete, his tidal volume is more sufficient compared to a non-trained athlete because he trains at steady-state exercise regularly. Therefore, his lung capacity has increased over the years, meaning the amount of air that he breathes in one normal breath is far more than an average athlete, which means that his breathing rate is steady because he has an increased tidal volume, and the amount of air he consumes in one breath, there is enough oxygen to allow his muscles to contract repeatedly. The graph shows the relationship between the partial pressure of oxygen and the oxygen saturation in the blood. When the graph moves to the right, it means there is a reduce in hemoglobin-oxygen affinity. So this means that the dissociation of oxygen to the tissues is decreased. This results in the reduced oxygen saturation, and this shift is known as the Bohr shift. The Bohr shift is seen during exercise. The curved line to the right shows this on the graph. This happens when there is an increase in temperature, CO2, or a decrease in pH levels when exercise begins. During steady-state exercise, when the CO2 levels increase initially and temperature rises due to the muscles giving off heat and the pH levels decrease, so it is more acidic, because of the low partial pressure of oxygen that is taken in by the lungs as the demand for exercise is higher than before. This has an effect on the ability for hemoglobin to bind with oxygen, so oxygen saturation decreases. A muscle spindle described by Adams et al. Are proprioceptors found in the skeletal muscles. They detect movement, or in this case the stretch of a muscle, and they indicate a response that resists the stretch. They do this by two different sensors, the primary sensory sensors and the secondary sensory sensors, establishing different information about the stretch that triggers a response. Primary sensory sensors respond to the velocity and the degree of the stretch. The information that receives gets sent to the spinal cord, whereas sensory sensors send information about the degree of the stretch to the central nervous system. Once the message has reached the central nervous system, the message is then transferred to the motor neuron. This allows the muscle to contract when the impulse reaches the muscle fibers from the motor neuron. Therefore, because the muscles have contracted, it reduces the stretch. However, the greater the stretch of the muscle, the greater amount of motor units are recruited. These procedures happen more frequently when you start to exercise because the body needs the muscles to contract repeatedly in order to run, jump, and throw. The Golgi tendon organ. This organ is a sensory receptor that detects the change in muscle tension. It is located within the tendons of the skeletal muscles, and when it is activated, they send messages to the central nervous system to be sent to the muscles, as the Golgi tendon organ controls the strength of the muscle contraction. Because the Golgi tendon organ inhibits muscle contraction so that the muscle relaxes, so therefore the opposite to muscle spindles. So these two components work together to, as Adams et al. States, facilitate smooth, coordinated movement patterns. Therefore, building up to steady-state exercise, these procedures should happen frequently, but when steady-state exercise is reached, the two components should work together at a constant rate and not change until the intensity of the exercise changes or exercise stops completely. During steady-state exercise, the energy system that is predominantly used is the aerobic glycolysis energy system. This energy system starts the same way as the anaerobic glycolysis energy system. The process starts when we have a buildup of adenosine diphosphate. This triggers an enzyme which is phosphofructokinase. This enzyme initiates the process of breaking down glycogen into glucose. Then the enzyme glycogen phosphorylase completes the breakdown of glycogen into glucose. The glucose is converted into pyruvic acid. The pyruvic acid gives us the yield of 2 moles of phosphate, which allows us to resynthesize to convert adenosine diphosphate into adenosine triphosphate. However, now this system uses oxygen as well as pyruvic acid. An enzyme called coenzyme A detects the pyruvic acid and oxygen. The enzyme acetyl-CoA combines with oxidoacetic acid to form citric acid. Citric acid enters the Krebs cycle. The Krebs cycle gives us 2 moles of phosphate that can be used to resynthesize an adenosine diphosphate into adenosine triphosphate. It also gives us more oxaloacetic acid and carbon dioxide, which is a waste product as we breathe it out. Lastly, and most importantly, it gives us hydrogen. The electron transport chain transports the enzymes NAD and FAD to chemically bond with hydrogen to give us the products of NADH and FADH. NADH and FADH give us positive hydrogen ions, which give us the byproduct of water, but also they give us hydrogen electrons. This results in 34 moles of phosphate to resynthesize adenosine diphosphate to adenosine triphosphate. The energy system lasts for over 3 minutes at aerobic intensity, so 60 to 70% of the athlete's maximum heart rate. This energy system is useful for endurance events. So the yield of phosphate this gives us is 34 moles, and the only byproducts are water and carbon dioxide. This is why this energy system is used in steady-state exercise, because it allows us to contract our muscles over and over again, as it creates 34 moles of phosphate to resynthesize with adenosine diphosphate to make adenosine triphosphate, which gives us energy.